Oh yeah!
Hi and welcome to my channel. This is Megan with Threads of Life Creations, and I am here today to give you a tutorial on how to make Diane Cademartori's Ice Drop using the tatting needle. So let's get started. The things you're going to need are a very small crochet hook. This is a 0.5 millimeter crochet hook. You will also need thread clippers, a stone, your thread. You do not need the ball holder. It's nice to have, but it's not a necessity. But you will need a size 20 thread, or 10 if you're going to do a much larger stone. And also a needle threader. Okay, so with the size 20 thread, what I use is a size 7 needle. Now this kit that I have here, it has size 8, which is extra fine, 7, which is fine, 5, which is usually used for a 10 or a 20, and then 3, which is pretty much anything bigger than a 10. That would be like your 5, your 3, or anything larger. The only time you're ever going to use the size 8 is if you are tatting with like size 80 thread. So you want to go, if you look at these, you can kind of see the difference in size, especially if they're kind of up close. These two probably look the same to you, but I can tell the difference between the two. One is actually larger than the other, and this one here is the larger one. This is going to be the one we're going to use today. This is the size 7. So we can go ahead and slide the rest of those back into our little container, and we can set this out of the way because we're not going to need that for the rest of the video. So there is our size 7 tatting needle. And we also have our chosen stone. We have our needle threader, our crochet hook, and this here is what we're going to be making today. I just had this here because I wanted to give you an idea of what we're going to be putting together so you can see that. And now that you've seen it, I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way as well. And just to, real quick, this one was made using needle tatting. So you can see, just to give you an idea of the differences. This one was done with needle tatting. This one was done with shuttle. So really the only difference is that my stitches are just a little bit looser with needle than they are with shuttle, but the overall look is pretty much the same. So we're going to go ahead and set that aside, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to do is take your needle threader, and you're going to pass this, you want to pinch this together like so, and you're going to pass this through the eye of your needle. Then you're going to take your thread, put your thread through your needle threader, pull it to the end like so, and then you're just going to pull your thread, maybe, back through, there we go, the eye of your needle. Then you won't need this anymore, so we can go ahead and set that aside as well. Or you shouldn't need it anymore. I'm keeping mine handy just because I have a habit of losing threads. Okay, so you want to leave probably, I'd say this is about a 4-inch tail. Anywhere from 3 to 4 inches on your tail will be fine. I have, oh, and you also want to have a picot gauge. But if you can see here, this is 3 inches. So I probably have about 4 inches there for that tail. And then what I do to measure out to make sure I have enough thread to work with, because I'm going to be working off my ball, is I take and I hold the end of my needle central to my chest, hold my thread in my other hand, and I just pull and straighten my arm out completely. So this should kind of give you an idea, probably not much, but that's they say it's about a yard, so I'm going to say that's roughly a yard plus those 4 inches on that tail. So that's about where I'm going to start tatting. Now what you're going to do is you're going to hold this needle, hold this thread to the side, keep this loop to the side. You're going to hold where you just measured, and you're going to pinch that to your needle using your dominant hand. And hold your needle in your dominant hand. Now you can shift your needle up and down within your hand to find a more comfortable position, but you want your thread to be right about where you had it. Then to make the first half of your double stitch, you're going to loop like so, slide your needle up your finger and pull that tight. To make the second half, you're going to loop like so and go down the back of your finger and pull that tight. We're going to repeat that. Front half, back half, front half, back half, front half, back half. So those are our first 4 stitches. And if you followed along well, you should have a good number. You should have your 4 stitches as well. I'm assuming when I make this video that you already know how to needle tat, that this is just you trying to figure out how to make Diane Cademartori's Ice Drop. I hope that this is the case. If it is not, I apologize. Feel free to check out any how-to needle tat videos. You can also, I will probably be putting one of those videos up myself sometime in the future, but for right now, I'm operating under the assumption that you already know how to do the basic stitch, how to make a picot, how to make a ring, all of that fun stuff. So the first thing we're doing right now is we're actually making a ring, and we're going to do, I think it's called a self-closing ring. At least that's what I've heard it called in other videos I've watched. So we have 4 stitches, and we're going to do this with 4 picot, 4 picot, 4 picot, 4 to start Diane's Ice Drop. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap the first half of my stitch, but before I close it, I want to position my picot gauge snug with the stitches that are already on my needle, and then tighten that down to meet that gauge. And you can see I'm just using the very tip of that picot gauge. Then I'm going to, and I actually like to wrap this around my pinky because it helps me get a little bit more tension in my ball thread. So then I'm going to go ahead and do the second half of my double stitch and tighten that down to meet it, and then I can pull my gauge away, slide my stitches together, and there's my first joining picot. That's also the first double stitch for my next set of 4 stitches. So that's 1, we're going to do, this is first half, second half 2, first half, second half 3, first half, second half 4. Slide those together. Now Diane tells us to do a 1/2 inch picot. And if you have this picot gauge, I don't know if you noticed in my shuttle video, but I was using this ledge here. And you actually, when it says 1/2 inch, it's telling you, this little arrow is telling you that this ledge is the correct ledge to use. So you don't want to use this one, you want to use this one. And that was my mistake before. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up, flush with my other stitches, hold it in place between my thumb and forefinger. Then I'm going to do the first half of my double stitch and tighten down on that ledge. Do the second half of my double stitch. Oops. And tighten to meet. And then I can pull my gauge out and slide those stitches together. So that is now our second picot with our first stitch for our next set of 4 stitches. So this would make 2 double stitches, 3 double stitches, and 4 double stitches. Now I'm going to slide my work down my needle because I need a little bit more needle end here to work with. So now I've got my first 12 stitches. I need another joining picot. So once again, I'm just using the tip of my picot gauge, setting it flush with those stitches, doing the first half of my double stitch, tightening it down to the proper, whoopsies. And occasionally that happens where everything gets away from me. So we're going to get this worked back into that stitch. Hold that in place. We're going to tighten that down like so. I like to hold it, once I have it, I like to hold it between my fingers. Then do the second half of my double stitch, tighten it into place. Then I can pull my gauge away, and there's my second joining picot with my first stitch. So that's 1, this is 2, 3, and 4. So now if you count, you should have a total of 3 picots with 16 double stitches. So now what we're going to do is we're going to close our ring. And to do this, all you do is hold your stitches, pull your needle through, and continue pulling until this tail is almost gone. But I like to catch it with my finger just to make sure I leave enough of a loop at the end here, because what I'm going to do before I fully close this, in order to make this into a ring, I have to take my needle, pass it up through that loop, and then continue to pull it all tight. And then as you can see, we have a ring. Now this ring isn't complete. The next thing I need to do is I'm going to take my needle, go over my ball thread, and back up like so, and then twist this and tie it. You can see the knot, and you can see that my ring also shifted and turned. What this does is it reverses our work, but it also ties off that ring so it's not going to come loose as we do our next set of stitches. So the next thing Diane's pattern tells us to do is 6 picot 6 chain. What we're actually going to do, because this is a slightly larger stone, is a 10 picot 10 chain. So we're going to go ahead and start with, this is 1 and 2, and you want to make sure you're holding your ring tight up against your needle when you're doing this, because you don't want to have a lot of space between your ring and your chains. And what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to tighten up that stitch a little bit. And there you go, you can kind of see that that's a little snug there. So I'm going to shift that back towards the middle of my needle. We're going to do another stitch. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I'm pulling these tight as I'm going so that they're tight against my needle, because I want to make sure I don't have loose stitches. They're going to be kind of loose as it is, so you want to make sure they're not too loose, because it can kind of change the way that the work looks. Then we're going to do a 1/4 inch picot, which is not this big ledge here, but the second biggest ledge. As you can see, it says 1/4 inch, then it has that arrow there, so you're going for the one with the arrow pointing down. Slide that snug with my stitching, hold that in place with my thumb, do the first half of my double stitch and pull it into place, hold it again, do the second half of my double stitch and tighten it down. So now I've done a picot with a securing double stitch. So that is the first of my next set of 10 stitches. So we're going to go ahead and do 1. Maybe I should just wrap it around my whole hand like this. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I can double check and make sure between this empty space and the end of my needle that I have 10 stitches. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there are in fact 10 stitches there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to close this, we're going to move these stitches for this chain off of my needle. And to do that, all I'm doing is gripping my stitches to hold them in place and pulling my needle through. And this time, because it's a chain, we are going to pull that loop the whole way through. We are not going to run our needle through it this time. So as you can see, that pulled it and it made us a nice little chain there. Now, I am not going to overly tighten this chain, and let me explain what that means. I can tighten this down as much as I want and slide all of my stitches super tightly together, but if I do that, number one, it's not going to pop out as much as it's supposed to, and number two, it's going to look kind of funky because all your stitches are going to be all smushed together. So I try to leave it, I tighten it just enough to give it the shape I want it to have, because I can loosen it up and it can go back straight like so, or I can tighten it just a little bit to give it that shape. Just enough to give it that shape, okay? Then we're going to do another, put our needle under and back up through that thread, and as we're tying this closed, we're going to reverse our work so that it ties down to a nice little half square knot. This is just the first half of a square knot, if you know what a square knot is. And again, that just secures that chain in place so it doesn't come loose as we're working, but it also reverses our work so that we can continue to work without a problem. So now we're going to do another 4 picot, 4 picot, 4 picot, wait. Now we're going to do another 4 picot, 4 picot, 4 picot, 4, except this time we're going to join to these 2 picots here. So let's go ahead and we will do our first 4 stitches. And again, make sure you're working right up against your chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to join. Now this is where your crochet hook comes in handy. I have a little clip cover on mine just so that that tiny hole, because I keep mine in a cloth bag, I don't want it picking and breaking off or getting caught and ripping threads out of my bag. So I have 4 stitches. What I'm doing here is I'm going down through this picot, hooking that thread, pulling it up and over my needle, and then just tightening that down into position. And that join there, that counts as the first half of a double stitch. So I'm going to do the second half of a double stitch to secure that join in place. And that is also the first of our next set of 4 stitches. So we're going to go ahead and do, this is 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to join again. This time we're joining to this large picot here. So we're going to grab our hook again, go down through that picot, pull this thread up, hook it over our needle, and pull it down tight. Do the second half of a double stitch to secure that in place, and kind of tug your picot just to make sure you don't have any extra picot in that position. You don't want to have a bunch of this picot hanging out here in the back. I mean, when we slide our stitches off, we'll be able to shift it again, but for right now, just to kind of make sure there's not a whole bunch of it back there, I just kind of tug it a little bit and tighten those stitches a little better. So then we're going to do another 3 stitches, because that join counts as the first of 4. So this is 2, 3 and 4 total stitches. Then we're going to make a joining picot, which again is just the tip of this picot gauge. Tighten it into place. Do the second half of our double stitch to second half to secure that in place. Tighten that down. Remove our picot gauge. Sliding my stitches down my needle again because I was losing my needle tip there. And I have my last picot for this and my first double stitch. So that's 1. This is 2, 3, and 4. So now you should have 4 join, 4 join, 4 picot, 4. So again, you should have a total of 16 stitches. And a good way to count, if you want to be thorough to make sure you have the right amount of stitches, is you can actually look and see how many of these little strands are on your ring, on your needle. If you have 16 stitches, 16 stitches as you should on your needle, then you would have twice as many little strands wrapped around your needle because there's 2 strands per 1 stitch. So you can even count them by 2s and go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32. And as you know, 2 times 16 is 32, so I know I have 16 stitches there. So we're going to go ahead and close our ring again, and again I'm just holding my stitches, pulling my needle through, catching that loop with my pinky to ensure it doesn't close the whole way, taking my needle up through that loop, pulling that tight, and then pulling the ring tight and closed like so. And once again, we're just going to go left to right under that ball thread to make a knot and effectively also reverse our work. And that again just tightens that ring into place, reverses our work for the next set of stitches. Now before we officially do that, go ahead and reverse back so you're looking at your rings on top. You want to take this picot, you're going to grab this top loop here, and you're just going to kind of work it out and to the left. So you're shifting the top of these 2 rings closer together. Okay, so let's go ahead and reverse back. This is how you would have ended if you tied your threads properly, as you can see. So I'm going to lay my needle, lay my project right flush with my needle, and I'm once again going to do 10 stitches. So we're going to start, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So those are our 10 stitches. We're going to do a 1/4 inch picot, and tighten that down, and then do another 10 stitches. So this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So that makes our 10 picot 10 chain. So I'm just going to grab the end, and I grab the end that has my thread coming off of it, because the rest of this is going to get pushed down either way. So I just grab that end, pull my needle through, and tighten that loose thread here. Oh my god, it's all tangled in and out. There it goes. And just tighten that down. Once again, I'm only tightening enough to get the shape that I want. Because if I over tighten it, I'll end up with funky looking chains and weird looking stitches. So it's just enough to get that shape. So I'm going to go ahead and go once again from left to right under that ball thread and tie my knot. And that once again effectively reverses our work. So now we're ready to do our next ring. So we're going to hold our project in place, and I kind of twist the rest of this out of my way because I find it gets in my way otherwise. So that kind of helps. But we're going to do our first 4 stitches. So this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to twist this back. Make sure that your chain isn't all twisted when you do this. And we're going to join to this picot we made the last time we made a ring. Pull that up, put it over the tip of my needle, tighten it down to have it in place. Second half of a double stitch to secure it. Counts as the first of 4. So this is 2, 3, and 4. And we're once again going to join to this large picot in the center. Do the second half of a double stitch to secure it. And I'm once again just kind of tugging on that to make sure there's not a lot of excess there. Shifting my stitches down a bit. That counts as the first of 4, so this is 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to do a joining picot. Helps if I do my stitch right. That's the first of 4, so this is 2, 3, and 4. So as you can see, we've got our 4 join, 4 join, 4 picot 4. We're going to close this ring. And I tied it on my needle pretty tightly this time, so my stitches were just having a little bit of a hard time coming off there. Holding my pinky in place, going up through that loop, and tightening everything down to close that ring. Now the rings you can pull tight. You just don't want to over tighten your chains, because if you over tighten your chains is what's going to make it look funky. So then once again I'm going with the tip of my needle from left to right up under that ball thread, flipping my work and tying down the knot. Then I'm going to shift that picot out some more so that my rings here, the tips of my rings are closer together. We're going to do another 10 picot 10 chain, and we're going to continue on. I'm not going to record the whole base because that would make for much too long of a video, but I'm going to continue on until I get to the last ring, and then I will show you where to go from there. Okay, and we're back, and as you can see here, I have my 5 rings and I have 5 chains. This one likes to try to flip for some reason. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and tat our final ring. And I've already tied my chain off, so this has that reversed work. We're going to go ahead and shift that out of the way. You want to make sure that you're holding your chain tight against your ring. So we're going to go ahead and do 4 double stitches here. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to join, and once again you want to make sure you're not twisting your ring when you do this. We're going to join to this first small picot right here. Go down, hook your thread up and over the end of your needle. Pull that tight and into place. Second half of a double stitch to secure it, and do another 3 stitches for a total of 4. So that's 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to join to this center ring that we've been joining all of our picot tips, or all of our ring tips to. So right up through that large ring in the center, up and over our needle, and tighten down into place. Second half of a double stitch to secure that. Then another 3 stitches for a total of 4, so that's 2, 3, and 4 total stitches. Now we're going to join to this picot, and we're going to do it the same way we've been doing the others. Just go straight down, hook your thread and pull it up, hook it over your needle end, and pull it tight. I have to shift my stitches down on my needle. Do the second half of a double stitch to secure that join in place. Tat another 3, so this is 2, 3, making a total of 4 stitches there, and that is our final ring. Now once again I'm holding my stitches here. I found that if I hold my pinky and my ring finger over my needle like so, when I pull this tight, this thread here that wants to twist and tangle on me is being forced, for the most part, to remain loose and go through as it's supposed to. And it also keeps that loop there so I can join my needle through that loop and tighten it down to make our ring. And that is our final ring. Make sure I have that tightened down and in place properly. We're going to go ahead and once again tie our knot here. And reverse our work. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our final chain, and then we'll get to show you how to do the second round for these ice drops. That's 1, 2, go ahead and fold this down, get out of the way, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We're going to do our 1/4 inch picot. With our double stitch to secure that. So that's 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and slide our stitches off our needle and onto our work. Pull that tight enough that it gives it its shape, just like so. And what I was doing for my own project is before I tied this off, or you could do it after you tie it off, but personally I prefer to lock join using my, what I would consider my shuttle thread here. So before I lock join this, or before I tie this off, I'm actually going to go in, shift these stitches away just a little bit so I can see here. Prior to these stitches, there's just a little loop between the two right here. I'm going to hook my needle thread, pull it down and up. Pay attention, I'm going to hold my place. Pay attention the way my crochet hook is going from right to left, because my needle is going to do the same thing through that loop. I'm going to grab the top part of this loop, which is actually, I believe this one. Pull that chain nice and tight and into place. Hold it there with my other hand, and then tighten that join down. And there we go. Then I can go ahead and tie these off like so. Actually, and there we go. So that is the bottom, or also known as the base, of our ice drop. So now what we're going to do is we're going to tat a 6 picot 6 picot 6 ring. Get my thread here ready. So we're going to tat our first stitch nice and close to the previous project. Keep that on there, tat nice and close. That's 1, 2, and you can kind of fold this out of the way if it's too much. 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to make a joining picot, which is this small tip. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oopsies. I was getting a little carried away with myself there. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches there. We're going to do another joining picot. Add another 6, so this is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, like so. And we're going to close this ring like we've done all the others thus far. And then once we get that ring closed and nice and tight, we're going to tie off again, which effectively reverses our work. Now in the shuttle version of this, when we reverse our work, we actually don't reverse our work for this round. But for the needle tatting, pardon me, but for the needle tatting version, you are going to reverse, because if you don't ever reverse this ring, you won't ever, like if you don't ever tie that off, you'll never have your threads in the right place to do your chains and your balls, your rings, I'm sorry. So we're going to tat, this is 8 double stitches for the chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now here's where I found it got just a tad confusing. Because once you have your ring, your 8 chains, you're going to go ahead and slide them off your needle and pull that tight. Then you're going to pull them from left to right over top of your project. So you can see that my ring actually is folded down. So I'm pulling them from left to right, and before I tie them off, I'm just going to kind of hold them in place here. I'm going to shift these chain stitches away just slightly so I can see here is the top of what would have been a stitch but isn't, hooking that thread from my needle up and onto my finger, again paying attention that my crochet hook is going from right to left. I'm going to take my needle, pass it the same way, take and tighten this chain into proper place, and pull that lock join nice and tight. Now I'm going to tie off my chain to effectively switch my threads. Now this is going to look confusing because you're like, well, now she's tatting it backwards, but I will show you what I did that I found works the best for me when making these. This may not be how everybody else needle tats these, but this is how I was able to make it work for me. So I go ahead, we're going to tat another 6 double stitches. I don't know why I just started that with this. That was the first half of the stitch. What am I doing? That's 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm taking my work, folding it over, and lifting this ring up. So to show you that again, this is how I'm tatting so far. I'm taking my work from this bottom half here, flipping it over so that it's now upright, and then flipping this ring up. And we're going to join from the inside. We're going down through the picot, hooking our thread up through the picot, and hook it over our needle. Tighten that down and in place, like so. And then we're going to secure that with the second half. So that's 1. We're going to do 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Do a joining picot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to go ahead and close that ring. And again, to do that, I'm just keeping this loop open and hooking up and through, and then pulling it tight. And then from here, I have to tie off, switch my threads, and also secure that ring in place. Okay, so now once again we're going to tat 8 double stitches to make our chain. So there's 1, 2, I'm going to have to hold this out of the way. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So once I have my 8 stitches, which I was just tatting this way, all I'm doing is pulling my needle through, and then I'm flipping my work over, so I'm looking at the same side that those first 2 rings are on, because we were just tatting it like this. So I'm just flipping this over so I can see where those rings are, and then once again I'm going to lock join here, and I'm shifting these stitches out just enough that I can see, okay, that was a knot, so here is the first non-stitch space. Hook that thread, pull it up through, take my needle, go through the same way my shuttle went through, tighten that in place, and tighten that join down nice and tight. Now again, we still have to tie off our threads. So once again, I'm tying off my chain to secure that chain in place, and then I'm going to tat another ring. And I'm doing this again on the video so I can show you once more how to do this. So this is 2, 3. You'll notice I'm looking at the back of my project. 4, 5, and 6. Taking this bottom section here, this is the back of the project, I'm taking this section right here, flipping it over like so, and then lifting these rings up. Taking my hook, going down through that picot, hooking my thread, pulling up and over my needle, tighten into place, second half of a double stitch, and then continue to tie your last few stitches. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Do a joining picot. That's 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then we're going to close our ring. And tie this off. And then we're going to go ahead and tat our next chain. Now I'm going to show you how to do this ring one more time before we fast forward in the video to when we have this completed. I'm not sure why this isn't turning on here anymore. There we go. And as you can see, that yard-long tail that we were working on is no longer an entire yard. We're losing more and more of it. I don't know why it keeps wanting to twist up the way it is, though. Okay. So we've tied this off. Tat our 8 double stitch chain. 2, 3, I'm sorry, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Pull our thread through our chain. Whoops. And just pulling that again from left to right. Lock joining here at the base of this chain. Pass my needle once more, right to left. Tighten that ring down in place, or the chain down in place. Tighten my lock join, and then tie off. Now what this is doing, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's actually making it so that these don't look twisted in with the chain. You can really see it here where it's not really twisted in. So even though I'm doing it backwards to start and then flipping everything, it's actually making this work better. If I wasn't doing this, it would actually twist really weird. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And once more, just to show you how we're doing this, I am turning my work over and lifting up these rings to make this join, going down through the inside of this ring, down through, hooking my thread and hooking it up and over my needle end, and tightening that in place. Second half of a double stitch to secure that down. Do another 6 stitches, so this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Make a joining picot. 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we're going to once more close our ring. Oopsies. And if at any point your ring gets off your finger and you lose where you're at, if you just look and see where the end of your chain is and then hook this up under that part, you'll actually pull it out straight if you pull it straight. And then you just tighten your ring down like so. And once more, we're going to tie off. Okay, so I already have 4 rings. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of this. I'm just going to let you watch this whole thing, just in case you're not getting it. Can't hurt to have it repeated. My ball holder here was starting to get a bit grabby with my ball thread. Okay, so I have this aimed the correct direction. I'm going to go ahead and tat my 8 double stitches chain. Whoa. 1, kind of hold my project out of the way. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I am once again just tightening up, sliding those stitches off my needle, moving them from the rings on the left to the open chain on the right. We're going to hook under this end stitch here, grab that thread. Ooh, uh-oh. It's been a while since I've had it do that. I didn't fully grab the thread before pulling it up. Take my needle up and through. Tighten it down. And tighten it down. Tie off again. Reverse this work as I'm tying it off. So I'm once again looking at the back of my work. Tat the first 6 double stitches of my next ring. And this is now the 5th ring. We're going to have a total of 6, just like we did on the bottom. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Going to reverse this. So if we're tatting this way, we're flipping it over and lifting these rings up to make this join. So again, going down, pulling this up, hooking it over the tip of our needle, and then tightening it in place, securing it with a double stitch, second half double stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. we're going to do this is our last joining picot that we will be making for this project. Because the next time we make a ring, it's going to join to this picot and to the first picot that we've made on this project. I had to shift my stitches because I was losing my thread again. So that's 1, this makes 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Like so. Okay. So once again, we're going to close our ring. Tie this off. And we're once again going to tat an 8 double stitch chain. One, two, three, 4. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Slide those off my needle and lock join them into place again. So once more, just shifting those stitches out at the base of that chain so I can see this little lip here. Hooking my needle up and through. Hooking my crochet hook, hooking my needle through that loop and locking it down and tying it off. Now here comes the fun part, because this is now where we're going to add our stone. So we're going to start this ring the same way we do all the others. Tat our 6 double stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Flipping this up, flipping these up, and joining. Taking that down and into place. Second half of a double stitch. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now before I was doing another joining picot here, because this is our final ring, that will not be happening. And I also need to get my stone in place before I make my final join. So we're going to go ahead and take our stone, we're going to slide it into place and turn our work slightly. So that we're looking at the opening hole. We're going to go this time, because we've been joining from the inside of these rings this whole time, we're doing the same thing. We're going from the inside, hooking our ball thread up and over the end of our needle. We're going to tighten this down to our needle and into place, like so. Second half of a double stitch to secure that join in place. Again, like so. And we're going to go ahead and tat the next 6 stitches. So this is 2, 3, 4, 5, one more makes 6. Now before I close this ring, I'm just going to get my hands in place. Go ahead and slide those off your ring. Once again, we're going up through this, pulling those nice and tight. And I kind of hold at this point I kind of hold my ring stitches flush with my stone because I don't want them to come loose or get twisted as I'm doing this part. Then we're just going to tie off here, which will flip our stitches, and we're going to tat our last chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now if you look here at the base of these rings, none of them are twisted, even though we twisted them quite a bit. They're actually all perfect. Go ahead and go through here, tighten that down. Go from right to left. We're going to cross over this final piece here. And before I lock this down, I just want to double check. I'm actually going to go through this slightly different. So at the base of this first ring, you have a little bit of a knot. What I'm doing is I'm kind of going under the knot, but there's a little thread here as well that I'm pulling up on the other side. So it's still going through a hole. It's not like I'm lock joining just to the knot. It's still going into something. Pull that up. And this is the only time when I'm going to take my needle the opposite direction from what my hook was doing. Because if my loop is over here, I just need to make sure that my needle goes through it in the right direction. Okay, and that is how to tat Diane Cademartori's Ice Drop. That is a completed ice drop. Now from here you can choose to tie it off. You can tie it off and snip your threads, tie it off and weave them in, or you can do what I like to do, which is I do my first half of my tie off as though I'm done, even though I know I'm not. And I still have a good bit of thread here that I don't want to waste. So what I'm going to do, and you can feel free to do this too, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to tat a twisted chain to go around and make like a little dangly bit. It's basically what this here is, so that I can take and have something to hang it from. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to do what's called the S stitch, or so I'm told. And what that means is we're essentially making the first half of a double stitch over and over and over. So we're going to do, that's 1. And we're just going to keep doing this and tightening it down. Keep going. And your project's going to probably spin a bit, because as you're doing this, you're actually causing that twist on your own. And I'm just going to keep going, and I tend to do this until I feel as though, well, for starters, I didn't want to go, kind of goofed it a little bit there. Hold on. Okay. So what I'm going to do is continue doing this stitch, this first half of a double stitch, until I have what I think is the majority of this. Basically, you want to kind of do it until you have twice as much twisted chain as you want the height of your loop to be. So we're just going to keep going, because it's going to take us a little while to get to this part, to get it as high as I want it, because I like my hanging loops to be a little bit higher. We're just going to keep going, keep doing the first half of the stitch over and over, letting it twist in our hand as it goes. So you don't end up with some loose, wonky, crazy stitches. And my ball thread is starting to twist itself from doing the same stitch over and over. So it's not quite high enough, so we're going to keep going. And I'm just kind of scooching it down to see where it is. Still not quite high enough, so we're going to keep going. This is usually the part that I do while watching TV or something, just to give my eyes and whatnot a break. And you'll notice that these stitches are so tight here, I'm actually having to shift them down my needle little by little. So I'm just continuing here until I have this the length that I want it to be. And actually, I would say that right there is probably pretty close to where I'd want it. I mean, I could go a little bit higher if I really wanted to, but why not? We'll go a little bit higher. So that looks plenty high enough. So now what we're going to do is, just like before, we are going to slowly work these stitches off the needle. And now I have to do this kind of slow because there's so many stitches on here and they're so tight that I can't shift them all down. So I'm just kind of shifting a little at a time and working my way to getting them all off my needle. And I'm making sure to hold the end of my stitches, this up here. I want to make sure I keep these stitches here nice and tight, because if those start to unravel, then we'll have an issue. And I'm trying to do this without bending my needle or anything. And we are so close to having them all out. There we go, loosen them up down there. And we're just going to have to kind of work our way to tighten this up. And we can actually take our needle out at this point. We shouldn't need it. All I'm doing now is just tightening this chain onto my thread. Okay. Not quite there yet. And once I have that about where I want it to be, and tighten those stitches down again and into place. It looks pretty good to me. And actually these ones can probably loosen up just a smidge so that they kind of match these ones here, unless I want these ones to be tighter, and then I would just help to twist that chain a little bit tighter in that area, because that will tighten those up, tightens that swirl up a bit more if you just kind of twist it tighter into place. I'm just holding it with my thumb and then twisting my work. Okay, so now that looks like pretty uniform twists. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look, and I can see this is kind of orange, and I can see there's an orange end of this chain here. We're going to take, and I can choose to either hook it here at the base, or I can hook it over here. I kind of like to hook it to the side. I kind of like to hook it here to the side because then it changes the way that this hangs. Instead of it hanging, you know, 3 and 3, it kind of gives it more of a point to the top and bottom. I don't know, that's just how I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and hold my needle thread, which is this thread here, down with my thumb. Keep that chain looped over my finger here, and keep my ball thread back and away. Hold that there with my thumb. I'm going to take my crochet hook, and I'm going to hook up under here. And I'm actually going under all these stitches. I'm not really going through any of them. I'm just going to go under all of them, grab onto that, and pull it up enough that I can then take my end of my thread, pass it through that loop, make sure my chain is nice and tight, and lock it down. Pull that nice and tight, that lock join there, and then we're gonna, once again, we're gonna tie off. Except this time, we're gonna do a complete square knot. So there's the first half of my square knot. and then the second half of my square knot. And just to be super extra secure, careful, I'm going to go ahead and do another half of a square knot, because I really do not want this coming loose, especially if I decide to give this away to somebody. So then we're just going to take our thread clippers and we're going to trim this nice and close. This is how I do it. I leave just a little bit of tail. I don't know if you can see that there. There's just a little bit of a thread tail there, but for the most part it's tightened. And then I can tug on this pretty hard actually, and it's not coming loose, which is what we want. Then just lay it flat on your table, kind of shift your chains, your base chains out a little bit, and voila! You have made your ice drop using the needle and needle tatting.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you